Okay. The speaker for the day is our own alumni, Podar Ratna, and a recipient of Sahitya Academy Award, Mr. Damodar Mauso. I consider myself really privileged for getting an opportunity to introduce our speaker of the day. Mr. Damodar Mauso joined Podar in June 1962 and graduated in 1966. He is a novelist, short story writer, critic, and script writer. He has 20 Konkani and one English book to his credit. His novel, Carmelin, has been translated into more than a dozen regional languages of India by Sahitya Academy. And for the same novel, he has been awarded Sahitya Academy in 1983. His collection of stories, These Are My Children, which is translated in English, was released at the Paris Book Fair in 2007. His work, Teresa's Man, was released at the Frankfurt Book Fair. The same was launched at Goa at the hands of renowned author Mr. Amitav Ghosh. Teresa's Man was nominated for the Frank O'Connor International Award. Sir is a recipient of many prestigious awards like Sahitya Academy, Goa State Culture Award, Goa State Reward, Goa Konkani Academy, Goa Konkani Academy Sahitya Pratibha Puraskar, State Literary Award for the collection of stories Ganthan, Katha Award, Best Dialogue Award, Best Screenplay Award, Janaganga Award, Vimala V. Pai Vishwa Konkani Sahitya Puraskar for the Best Drama Manuscript. And sir is still active in the literary world, so we are expecting many more awards to come in future too. Presently, sir is an editor of Konkani Translation Project of Vachan run by Basava Samiti Bengaluru, jury member of Chayan Samiti for Saraswati Samman. He is a founder trustee of Asmitai Pratishthan Goa, founder member of the Goa Writers Group, life member of Konkani Bhasha Mandal. Sir is also a co-founder and co-curator of Goa Art and Literary Festival. Sir has been a student of Principal Palekar, sir. And if I may add one more point in sir's introduction, that he met his better half in Podar itself. So I would like to welcome Shaila ma'am also on this evening for the lecture series. Today, sir is going to share his thoughts on the topic Joy of Giving. Which other topic can we think of when it comes to the inaugural lecture of the lecture series in memory of Palekar sir? Throughout his life, he gave. He gave knowledge, happiness, motivation, encouragement, and an unconditional love to his students. Every person who came in his contact received what he desired. This one quality of Palekar sir out of many, we wish if we, the teachers of Podar and the students also, could imbibe. On this beautiful evening, I welcome you, Mauzo sir, to share your thoughts on joy of giving. This virtual stage is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vishali ji. Namaskar, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Respected Principal Dr. Shobhana Vasudevan, the Coordinator Professor Manjusha Sawant, Miss Professor Vishali with anchoring this show, members of the college staff, both teaching and non-teaching staff, the members of the Palekar family and extended family too, fellow Podarites and friends. A very good evening to all of you who have joined on this virtual platform to celebrate the first post-centenary birth anniversary of late Principal Professor G.P. Palekar. I am filled with nostalgic memories as I recollect my college days as a student of this great college with Professor G.P. Palekar as its principal. Not that I was very close to Professor Palekar, but as an observer, I closely watched him as a head of the institution, as an administrator, as a teacher, and as a human being. He was not an extrovert in the literal sense of the term. He was a man of few words, but indeed was a convivial person with no inhibitions. He liked to promote the justifiable cause and help the deserving aspirants. He strived to bring a smile on the face of every individual around. Friends, I'm introduced to you as a writer, as a man who deals with letters, and I have planned this lecture to deal with the common aspects of literature and education, as were understood by Professor Palekar, of course, from my perspective. I cannot say that I began my career as a writer when I was a student of this college, but certainly I had started writing then. I strongly recollect how my principal encouraged my literary and cultural activities. I learned my lessons from my principal. I am a witness to the dedication with which Professor Palekar performed Vidya Dan, strongly believing that it was the most Pavitra Dan. He was aware that a teacher is a core component of the excellence to be achieved by any students. He gave his best to impart knowledge, but he did not limit his services to Vidyadan only. He pushed students to take up extracurricular activities. He put his weight behind social camps that were taken care of by Professor U. Bhatt. During his term, the mountaineering expeditions were taken up and hikes were encouraged. He encouraged literary and cultural activities. It is with his support that Professor M.V. Changadkar became indispensable at BCCI, while many sportspersons like Farooq Engineer rose to great heights to become national figures and international too. Principal Palekar was a great facilitator. He became a bridge that helped the students cross and move forward. He offered his services to the college with no expectations of any returns. He had this inherent quality to give, not necessarily in terms of money. I vividly recollect how Professor Palekar strived to lighten the burdens of the needy, of the marginalized, of the neglected, who were ambitious but short of resources. This is precisely why I have chosen to speak on the theme of joy of giving. I distinctly remember how Professor Palekar encouraged Sri Shantaram Tadekar, whom I knew then as a writer, as a playwright. He encouraged him to write and stage Marathi plays. Tadekar, who hailed from an underprivileged community, had joined our college as a peon and later retired as a clerk. He had a penchant to write plays. Professor Palekar unfailingly made Podar College auditorium available to him. I do not know whether it was given to him free of charge or by charging a minimum rent. But one thing I am sure, those were the days when college auditorium was in great demand. Many plays, renowned plays like Raigadla Jeva Jagete, that time it was a leading play. It was staged in this auditorium. So auditorium was always in demand, yet he allowed him to make best use of the auditorium. He was also permitted to hold rehearsals in college premises. The plays that were meant for a labor class audience were mainly staged on weekends. I have often seen Professor Palekar attending as chief guest at Tadekar's opening shows, addressing the audience. Friends, I have rarely seen such humility towards the underprivileged people. Whenever I come across St. Francis of Assisi's quote that reads, it is in giving that you receive. I think Professor Palekar, in all probability, Professor Palekar, who came up the hard way, comprehended it from his own experience that he lived through. He helped the needy students, made them available of scholarships, free ships, and other facilities that the institution offered. He had realized that an investment in knowledge would fetch the best interest, and it is proven now. He himself rose from a clerk to head a highly reputed educational institution which today is one of the best 10 autonomous colleges of India. His life has set an example for students to emulate. Friends, I personally don't have much regard for Sir Winston Churchill because of his imperialist and racist attitude. However, I like the quote that is attributed to him, and I quote, "We make a living by what we get. We make a living by what we get, and we make a life by what we give." This is what Sir Winston Churchill once said. Professor Palekar made his life by giving and sharing. Joy of giving has become a cause today that is championed by philanthropists across the world. But this was espoused by Professor Palekar 60 years back, maybe more than that, without much ado. It is a coincidence that this month, October, we celebrate Joy of Giving Week as Dan Utsav Saptah. Dan Utsav is generally celebrated beginning with Gandhi Jayanti, that is 2nd of October, till the 8th. It is also known as the Festival of Philanthropy. Some big corporate houses take this opportunity to fulfill their corporate social responsibility by observing this week. But back in the 60s, did Professor Palekar take up the cause to fulfill the CSR? Certainly not. He did so because he believed in the culture of giving. He knew that the more you give, the more you get. Not in terms of material gains, but in terms of fulfillment, in terms of contentment. As James Miller once said, nothing else in all life is such a maker of joy and cheer as the privilege of doing good. Having people like Professor Palekar in the field of education was an asset for the SP Mandali and Podar College. Aristotle once said, the purpose of education is to create a sound mind in a sound body. I maintain the same holds true of literature. A healthy mind in a healthy body is what literature strives for. In the early 60s, when I was a student of this college and of Professor Palekar, literature formed a significant part of the syllabus. I was taught James Hilton's novel, Lost Horizon. Professor Padmanabh Tole, who taught us the novel, would bring alive the Tibetan landscape and the utopian place called Shangri-La. So lucidly he brought to life the Lama monastery where one ceased to age. I could almost relate to the Himalayan ranges and the often read about learned monks and sages, the sadhus. The impact was such that even today, 58 years after having been taught the book, I can visualize the protagonist of the novel, Conway, his junior colleague, Marinson, and the lady inmate of the monastery, Lotsen, that looked young. I was amazed the way the author revealed the death of that woman who, after falling in love, leaves the monastery and dies as an old woman as she arrives in the outer civilization. That was the magic of teaching by Professor Tole. I also recollect how I was moved by the English, Hindi, and Marathi writings taught by veterans like Professor M.V. Changarkar, Professor G.N. Sathe, and Dr. Sarojini Vaidya. My reading habits were fostered here, though it was a college of commerce and economics. That is amazing. It seems that the present-day education system underrates literature that was once an integral part of education. Of course, this is my perspective. You may not agree with it. Today, except for a few leading institutions, Udar included, there is hardly any emphasis laid on promoting reading habits. It needs to be noted that critical readings prepares our youth for life ahead, and also helps expand their worldviews. Probably with this in view, Professor Palekar ensured the smooth running of the various literary circles. We call them Bangmai Mandals. The Konkani-speaking students had a Konkani literary circle of our own. I had edited the Konkani section of our annual magazine during my days here. And when I wrote a play and broadcast it on All India Radio under the banner of our college, I could see the glimmer of pride in the eyes of Professor Palekar. A word of appreciation from my principal was an award for me and my colleagues too. It is rightly believed that literature helps readers to understand our history, our ethos, and our culture. It gives us insights into the future and also acquaints us with the changing values of life. Values are chirantan, we all know it. Yes, they are, but only the basic ones, such as truth and honesty, love and compassion. If dharma is a code of conduct, values are standards of righteousness. By adhering to values of life, we evaluate our integrity, our spiritual well-being. Society looks at values as measures to ascertain if our life is turning out the way we want it to be. However, we in literature don't like to be guided by any set ideas of values. We constantly try to redefine values and value system. Of course, we find wonderful scriptures and quotes in Sanskrit, which we must uphold as our precious treasure. The human values are imagined in them. For example, let me read out Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amritam gamaya, which means lead us from ignorance to truth, lead us from darkness to light, lead us from death to immortality. This precisely underlines the purpose of education. Education that will impart knowledge for all. Our traditional values want us to believe in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or love thy neighbor. Yet, while in schools we conduct ourselves differently. We hate our neighbors and the neighboring countries which are projected as enemies. We are told that our values are universal, and in the same breath, we are taught that our values are different from those nurtured by the others, particularly the other countries or say the West. This othering factor is becoming bold day by day. This is where literature and education need to work in unison. Our ancestors cared for others. Their prayers were and are to do with humanity. Look at this prayer now. Sarve, you probably have heard it and you know about it, yet let me repeat it. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani paschantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhave. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Not for everybody's satisfaction, but for my satisfaction, I'll tell you the meaning of this. May all become happy. May all be free from illness. May all see what is auspicious. And ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhave. May no one suffer from any pain. Hail peace. This all-inclusive message, which depicts compassion for all, is very pertinent today. However, we need to be careful while passing judgment over the age-old values cherished by our ancestors. Everything that is old is not gold. There are messages quotes and sayings that carry wrong messages which need to be questioned by our times. Let me take one such saying which, which reads, Artho hi kanya parakiya eva. Artho hi kanya parakiya eva. The meaning, the meaning is a daughter to you is some other's property that is in your custody. Meaning, until it is given in marriage, until it goes to that other. This is obnoxious. The girl child, somebody else's property. Just the girl child is your property. Is a girl a property? No one will dare say it today. No one will say it today. Whereas why I'm quoting this is everything that is old is not gold, because we hear the cries that value system is getting eroded today, and often the youth is blamed for the erosion of values. Some even call the youth a spoiled lot, very unfairly. I don't like it. The elders expect the youth to hold on to the values of life. The policymakers in particular are constantly trying to find ways to bring about the desired change by inculcating the values through the medium of education. The attempt is commendable. The responsibility to take corrective measures lies in our teachers. But how can we spare teachers for the present day situation? They are part of our society. Only those teachers who have conviction in the values will be able to deliver. I can claim that with great pride that Professor Palekar, whether in public life or in his personal life, never treated his daughters like someone's property, not even as his own property or his belonging. He brought them up as independent entities. His daughters have reason to believe, reason to be proud of their father, who taught them to be independent, to think independently, to lead a life that is independent. In turn, they too brought him glory. And this is amazing. This is what is expected. When you give, you get. In turn, they brought him glory. This is where the saying comes true: you get what you give. The ultimate goal of education and literature is to change men and women into better beings. Religion too is the ultimate source of social cohesion. And our republics are to exercise their political power to establish the law and order in their respective states. In times when people stray away, what literature does is to mirror the society within a narrative. It is a mechanism that corrects the wrongs. Literature shows the way to the erring people, the way Charles Dickens has done it before. Looking at the present day scenario, when you notice the growing intolerance around the world where people resort to violence, you feel that the contemporary literature has fallen short of expectations. Why do we see the rising levels of violence and intolerance in our society? The checks and balances seem to have fallen apart. The writers who want an end to intolerance are being victimized by the over-ambitious political giants. The very fact that the writers' fraternity the world over is apprehensive of the rising intolerance in society, it is clear that the problem is assuming enormous proportions. This has given rise to literature of protest. What happens in literature is the reflection of what happens in our society. What the Indian epic Mahabharata shows us is the futility of war. Is not George Orwell's Animal Farm a piece of literature of dissent? Because it attacks the idea of authoritarian and repressive regime. The famous quote that some are more equal than others holds good even today. History has taught us that dissident literature can change the course of undesirable events. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he held, and I quote him, I quote, "The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character," and I repeat, intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. I unquote. According to him, education should also develop one's unique character to applied knowledge. This is precisely where language and literature come into picture. Language foregrounds literariness that tends a helping hand to communicate effectively, while literature helps to focus on understanding the meaning and purpose of life. And education on the basis of language and literature adequately prepares the students' community to evaluate their circumstances and in turn self-determination. Our failure to appreciate this connection is leading our youth to grope in the dark. Many believe that India is facing a serious moral crisis. I don't subscribe to this view. Nonetheless, it is true that educationists need to seek certain changes that will have impact on students' character. No readjustments in curriculum can bring about the desirable change unless the system is given a thorough shake-up. It is learned that the Education Commission has laid out emphasis on certain values as the essential in formation of character of the students. Let me explain you this character. The essentials are these. They are efficiency, integrity, discipline, honesty, cooperation, social responsibility, and good temper. Fine. But are these values upheld and cherished by our teachers, whom students emulate as their role models? No doubt, we have to teach our students our mythology and the great epics, but teach students mythology as mythology. Teach them Ramayana and Mahabharata. Ask them to take up the comparative study of Tulsi Ramayana, which is far stretched from Valmiki Ramayana. Let them find out how the human behavior in Mahabharata was not much different from that of today. Teach Vedas and Upanishads, not to admire them blindly, but to critique them objectively. Also familiarize the students with teachings of other faiths and allow them the liberty to compare, to find similarities and commonalities. In order to achieve this, the young minds need to be given the freedom to think objectively, to think rationally, and to think independently. I am of the strong opinion that the teaching of the constitutional values can bring about the desired change in the psyche of the students in particular and people in general. The Constitution of India, the Constitution, which to me is an all-religious scripture, needs to be taught at all levels of education. And this can best be achieved through the stories. Dr. Sudhir Kakkar, the renowned psychoanalyst and writer, once told me that the best way to reach out to the youth is through the stories. Books, films, literature can make better impact on their mind than preaching and teaching. Those children's stories, teach them through children's stories at the primary level, through historical examples at the secondary level, and actual constitution studies at the tertiary level. I am of the strong opinion that the teaching of the constitutional values can bring about the desired change in the psyche of the students in particular and people in general. It is generally believed that the edifice of a strong and vibrant nation, can be built on the bedrock of a stable and sustainable value system in tune with our national ethos and human values for which it stood for. This is exactly what our Constitution stands for. The values discussed by our educationists are already enshrined in our Constitution. And they are, of course, many of you need not be explained, but let me take this opportunity to reach out again and repeat. And these enshrined in our Constitution, they are justice, social justice, economic justice, and political justice. Then liberty, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of belief, faith, and worship. Equality of status and opportunity. And fraternity that assures the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. These basic values need to be adhered to in word and in spirit. I feel that these days literature has lost its privileged place in pursuit of knowledge. Knowledge of science and technology has become indispensable in the race for professional careers. There is no doubt that in the modern world, we cannot do without science. However, the latter trends has led to a decline in the reading habits of students. Parents and teachers often think that reading books other than the prescribed academic text is a waste of time. This notion is not new. It is not new today. I was a voracious reader during my student days, and I was a victim of the watchful eyes that often snatched away the books from my school bag. Of course, my intense preoccupation with books, with literature, was not altogether wholesome. I recollect now, just like my fellow students who planned to go to the science stream, ignored language classes, I would ignore the subjects other than languages, little realizing then that one needed a balanced knowledge of maths, science, and humanities to do well in life. Let me share a study report that I read some time back, and very authentic report. The study noticed that most of our civil servants and the top level management people, supposed to be highly intellectual, were insensitive to the problems of the commonest of common people. They fall short of expectations while dealing with the Dalit issues, the farmers' agitations, or religious fanaticism. The reason cited was that the so-called top brains were unable to empathize or sympathize with these people, with the marginalized. The expert advice was that literature should be incorporated in the IIT and IIM syllabus to sensitize the brilliant minds to the ground realities. Well, there is no inbuilt antagonism between the arts and science and commerce. But unfortunately, the perceptions of the stakeholders create the difference. The emphasis on science and technology in view of career prospects is not out of place, but it is disproportionate. However, that phase seems to be passing now. The humanity has a bright future as long as both art and science live together. Apparently, the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences is engaged in accomplishing this goal. It is a proven fact that every stream of learning is equally effective and important. The mad rush for computer science or internet technology is over. Humanities are regaining the significance as they have learned to coexist with technology. In the prevailing situation, literature has reacquired importance in education. The rat race for excellence that we witnessed in the last over 50 years was indeed a serious matter. Many cases of depression and suicides were reported. Many students had to resort to psychological counseling to get rid of the stress. The works of eminent writers threw light on this issue and made the parents to realize the folly of it. At this juncture, it may not be out of place if I recall the culture of internationalism. The culture of internationalism that was growing among the ambitious students of the 70s, maybe earlier also, who had an eye on the higher studies abroad. It is pertinent to note that the visionaries in the Shikshan Prasarak Mandali who took note of the brain drain that was happening and to contain it, late Principal L.N. Willinkar Institute of Management was founded in 1977. I hope this was the reason why they came up with this idea of establishing this management school. I will not be surprised if someone tells me that Professor Palekar was in the loop when the decision was taken. But it was a wise decision and it was probably emulated by many other institutes later. Many hold apprehensions about the complementary role of literature and education. Let me give a live example of how a creative artist, when joins hands with a technocrat, some miraculous phenomenon can evolve. You all know the name of Steven Spielberg, the filmmaker. When the renowned filmmaker wanted to project a character of otherworldly dimensions, probably many of you have seen the movie also, E.T. It became very, very famous some years back, I mean, many decades back. So he wanted to project a character of otherworldly dimensions, but he was stuck. Nobody could understand what he wanted. He had in mind a robo-like alien who would look scary, yet lovable, even to children. He wasn't happy with several prototypes that he tried and he came across until he met the designer, engineer, Carlo Rambaldi, who created the E.T. extraterrestrial as envisaged by Spielberg. The E.T. went on to charm the world, and Rambaldi came to be known worldwide as a wizard who transformed the scraps of metal and rubber into animated creatures that was odd and scary, yet could win the awe and affection of the audiences everywhere. This is the magic when art and science come together. We all are born with some or other skill. When we are young, we have innovative ideas. But as mostly it happens, if we do not get the right kind of impetus, we are likely to lose interest in our aptitude. With each passing day, we lower our goals and allow ourselves to fall in our own eyes. We then shut ourselves in a mediocre life. We forget that it is never late or never too late to try to reach out for stars. It is the mentoring by the teachers of the kind of Professor Palekar that helps the students to come out of their shell and try to reach out for stars. I am happy that Podar College continues to have dedicated and brilliant teachers who have the qualities of our late Professor Palekar to mentor and infuse the zeal among the students to reach out to greater heights, and to reach out to the stars. I'm sure the younger ones here in virtual attendance ponder over this and get motivated to make the maximum use of the talent that they have. And friends, before I conclude, I pay my respects to my late principal, Professor G.P. Palekar, who taught me the joy of giving and sharing. Well, Professor Palekar, whom I knew, was a man of simplicity, a man of humility, a man of dignity, a man who respected others' dignity. And I wouldn't call him workaholic, but he knew how to get the work done. So I really, not only me, I think all my colleagues who were my college mates or my classmates probably have learned something or other from late Principal Palekar. And I'm very happy and feel myself privileged to be here amongst you to deliver this inaugural memorial lecture. I thank the staff for giving me this opportunity. And then before I close my talk, I may be permitted to recite the inspirational and popular Marathi verse of the legendary poet Vinda Karandikar. I had fortune of being in his association, in his contact, um, and I'm very proud that I knew him in person. Vinda Karandikar's poem is a very famous poem. Probably many of you are familiar with it. Yet you wouldn't mind, I'm sure, to listen to listen to a couplet from his poem that sings of virtue of giving, the virtue of giving. देणाऱ्याने देत जावे, घेणाऱ्याने घेत जावे, देणाऱ्याने देत जावे, घेणाऱ्याने घेत जावे, घेता घेता घेणाऱ्याने देणाऱ्याचे हात घ्यावे, देणाऱ्याचे हात घ्यावे. With these words, I conclude. Thank you everybody for the patiently listening to my talk, and many thanks to the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Uh, Listening to you is indeed